Hello Year 4, welcome to another online English lesson. Today we're going to be using the skills that we've learnt so far this week and applying them in a test style situation. So it's not a real test, it's just a practice test. It's just an opportunity to apply the skills that we've been learning to the sorts of questions that we might see in a test style situation. So if we look at our VIPERS acronym, we talked about this a little bit a couple of days ago. And each of the letters of the VIPERS acronym represents a skill that we need to be able to use if we're looking at a text for the first time, so if we're looking at an unfamiliar text. So the V stands for vocabulary skills, the I stands for infer, the P stands for predict, the E stands for explain, the R stands for retrieve, and the S stands for summarise. So on Monday we looked at our vocabulary skills and our inference skills. On Tuesday we looked at our vocabulary skills and our explanation skills. Yesterday we looked at our vocabulary skills, inference skills, explanation skills, and we had a writing focus of building up our sentences and our descriptions. And then today we're focusing on retrieval and summarise. So retrieval means we're focusing on looking at the text and finding information directly from the text to answer some quite specific questions. So looking for detail. And summarising is looking at the text as a whole. So we're looking at the big picture and we're putting the events in order and saying what happens first, next, then and after that. So by the end of today's lesson we would have covered 4 of the 5 skills that we need to approach an unfamiliar text. So in our home learning packs we're moving on from our story about the little people in the hill to another mythical story, and this time it's a Greek myth, a story that the Greeks used to tell one another. So it's not true, it's fiction, it's just a myth, and it's a really interesting old Greek story. So on this page here, the story of Arachne, this ancient Greek story. Turn to that page now, and then the page after that has some questions in the style of a test. So to start with, I'll read through the story and then we'll pause the video and have a go at the test. Then we'll talk about the answers. So mythical stories from different cultures. The story of Arachne. So we know it's fiction. We know it's made up because it tells us it's a story. A long time ago there lived a young Greek girl called Arachne. She was the daughter of a shepherd. From a young age, Arachne taught herself how to weave beautiful tapestries. So she's making artwork out of fabric, she's weaving it, she's weaving a beautiful picture. So it's almost like painting made out of fabric. It's that beautiful. She wove pictures of animals, flowers and landscapes. By the time she was an adult, her work was so famous that people would travel for thousands of miles to see it. When people saw Arachne's work, they would tell her how talented she was. They were so impressed that they started to say that Arachne was like a god. Every day, people would tell Arachne over and over again how brilliant she was. The more praise she was given, the more Arachne believed she was the best. Meanwhile, at the home of the gods, the goddess Athena had heard about Arachne. She was angered by the idea that someone would say they were more talented than a god. So Athena hatched a plan to confront Arachne. So she's confronting her, she's going towards her and saying, go on then, go on, show me how good you are. Challenging her. A few days later, disguised as an old woman, Athena knocked on Arachne's door. I have come to warn you, Athena rasped. So she's speaking like that, if she's rasping. It's like that kind of voice. I have come to warn you, Athena rasped. You should never have compared yourself to the gods. If you apologise now, Athena will forgive you. Arachne, who was surprised at what had just happened, looked at the old woman. Not surprised she's surprised, because that's the old woman there and she looks completely different to Athena. So she definitely wouldn't have recognised her as Athena. Arachne, who was surprised at what had just happened, looked at the old woman. She laughed. Apologise? Why should I? You've seen my tapestries. I'm better than any human or god. If Athena wants an apology, she can come down here and challenge me for it. By now, Athena was so angry that she threw off her disguise and revealed her true self. I accept your challenge, she whispered to Arachne in a cold voice. She's so angry she can't even speak. She's just whispering, "I accept your challenge." Arachne got to her feet right away and began to gather the finest thread she had. Both women started weaving, and for hours the only noise that could be heard was the gentle sound of working hands. Several hours later, Athena declared that the competition was over and demanded that Arachne bring her work. So Athena's really the bossy one in this situation. She's really calling the shots and telling Arachne what she ought to be doing. Arachne held up her tapestry to the lamplight. Her scene was beautiful. It showed God's being mean to humans and not being punished. Even in the low light, it was clear to see that it was a masterpiece. Athena's work, which showed the gods punishing humans who misspoke about them, was nowhere near as fine. It's interesting that they chose those themes for their work, isn't it? That Athena's work was all about gods punishing humans. Athena was furious that she had lost. She was really angry and immediately ripped Arachne's work into pieces. Arachne screamed at her to stop, but it was too late. The tapestry was ruined. Arachne fell to the floor and sobbed. She knew that nobody would buy her work now. It's really sad, but it gets worse. However, Athena did not feel that Arachne had been punished enough. She took a small bag of herbs from her pocket and sprinkled them over Arachne. Suddenly, instead of 2 legs, Arachne now had 8 thin legs coming out of her sides. Ooh, I know some things that have 8 legs and they're quite scary. The spiders. She was covered in tiny hairs and a single thread of silk hung from her. I know that spiders make cobwebs. Oh dear. And they're covered in tiny hairs. It definitely sounds like she's been turned into a spider. "Well, now you can weave all day long," cried Athena, looking at the hideous creature in front of her. She's hideous because she's a scary creature, isn't she? People tend to think that spiders are scary. "You, a spider, better than the gods?" "I don't think so." "Well, now you can weave all day long." "You, a spider, better than the gods?" "I don't think so." What a horrible way to get her revenge. My goodness, just because Arachne won the competition, Athena was so jealous she turned her into a spider so she could weave cobwebs all day long and never weave a tapestry again. Horrible, horrible illustration at the end. Arachne as a spider. Those 8 legs. Oh dear. Okay, would you like to pause the video and have a go at the comprehension questions on the next page? Then we'll go through the answers. Okay, thank you for having a go at comprehension questions. Let's talk about the answers. Question 1. What type of animal does Arachne get turned into? Tick 1. She could either be a sheep, a spider, a scorpion, or a silkworm. We know she's a spider, don't we? Because in that final paragraph, Athena says, "You, a spider, better than the gods?" I don't think so. So we know that Athena has definitely turned Arachne into a spider. So we can tick this one here. Number 2. Number the events from 1 to 4 to show the order that they happened. The first one has been done for you. So this is a summarising question. We're looking at the big picture of the story and putting the events in order. Number 1 has been done for us. It says, crowds of people told Arachne how talented she was. So that's how the story started, isn't it? Arachne became maybe a little bit too confident in her talents and started to challenge Athena. So number 2, the next one, could either be Athena disguises herself as an old woman, or Athena sprinkles herbs over Arachne, or Athena wins the competition. It can't be Athena sprinkles herbs over Arachne because that happens at the end. We know that's how she's turned into a spider. I don't think it can be Arachne wins the competition because they haven't started the competition yet. So I think it must be the first one. Athena disguises herself as an old woman. So I put a number 2 here. So we need to decide which one's a number 3 and which one's a number 4. So number 3 could either be Athena sprinkles herbs over Arachne, or Arachne wins the competition. it can't be Athena sprinkles herbs over Arachne because that happens right at the end. So it's got to be this one. Arachne wins the competition. Which means number 4 has got to be the one above, which happens right at the end. Athena sprinkles herbs over Arachne. Okay, let's look at question 3. When Athena accepted the challenge, what was the first thing Arachne did? Tick 1. So we're looking for what Arachne did immediately after Athena accepted the challenge. So let's just read that paragraph again. It's reading the bottom of this paragraph and then the top bit of the next paragraph. By now, Athena was so angry that she threw off her disguise and revealed her true self. I accept your challenge, she whispered to Arachne in a cold voice. Arachne got to her feet right away and began to gather the finest thread she had. So the first thing she does is gets up and gathers the threads that she has, the best ones to weave the best tapestry. So that means it must be this one here. She gathered the finest thread she has. The first thing she did. She didn't gather wool because she was weaving, so she wouldn't weave with wool. She didn't tell the crowds that she was going to win. And she definitely didn't beg Athena to reconsider. She was absolutely up for the challenge, and she gathered the finest threads that she had. Number 4. This is another summarising question because we're looking for the cause and effect. So what happens first and what happens as a consequence of that? So match Arachne's actions to Athena's response. One has been done for you. So this one has been done for us. Arachne's actions on this side are matching up to Athena's response on this side. And here we've got Arachne says Athena should challenge her, so Athena accepts the challenge. That's been done for us. Let's look at this one here. Arachne believes she is the best. So because Arachne believes she is the best, Athena gets angry and hatches a plan. So tick or fix your answer. Because Arachne starts weaving a masterpiece, Athena begins weaving. So we're looking for cause and effect. And because Arachne wins the competition, Athena tears Arachne's work into pieces because she's jealous. And number 5. What does Athena disguise herself as when she meets Arachne for the first time? We think right back to the beginning, so it's a very, very good disguise. So meanwhile, at the home of the gods, the goddess Athena had heard about Arachne. She was angered by the idea that someone would say they were more talented than a god. So Athena hatched a plan to confront Arachne, challenge Arachne. A few days later, disguised as an old woman, Athena knocked on Arachne's door. I have come to warn you, Athena rasped. You should never have compared yourself to the gods. If you apologise now, Athena will forgive you. So at that point, Arachne doesn't even know that it is Athena, so it's a very effective disguise. Now it says here, that first line of that paragraph, a few days later, disguised as an old woman, Athena knocked on Arachne's door. So that's our key sentence that tells us that Athena disguised herself as an old woman. So our answer for question 5 is an old woman. Well done everybody, you've worked really, really hard. Those are really tricky questions. So we've now looked at 4 of our 5 skills that we need when we're approaching a text the first time, as approaching an unfamiliar text. And the focus today has been retrieval and summarising. So looking for specific details and looking for the big picture and putting events in order. Really well done. Thank you for working so hard. And I'll see you tomorrow for another online English lesson. Bye.